Welcome back to Research Methodology course. My beautiful co-host, how are you?
I'm doing great, thank you. Ready to really get into the weeds with research proposals today.
Absolutely. And everyone listening, get ready because we are going deep. Today's focus is all about understanding and, crucially, writing a really strong research proposal. Specifically, thinking about TESOL and English language studies, and we're drawing heavily on the great work by Huyen Trong Luan, PhD.
Yeah, his insights are spot on. And look, whether you're gearing up for an assessment, maybe trying to really ace it, or you're laying the groundwork for some serious research,
Right.
you absolutely have to understand what makes a good proposal work. It's non-negotiable, really.
Totally agree. So, quick heads up for everyone tuning in. If you find this useful, please do give us a thumbs up, subscribe. You know the drill. It helps others find us.
Definitely.
And yeah, maybe grab a coffee or tea. Settle in. We're about to unpack this properly.
We really are.
Yeah.
Because today, our mission, if you will, is a super meticulous analysis. We're going to dissect every single bit of a research proposal.
Every detail.
Every detail, exploring all the nuances. The goal here is to give you, the listener, a complete, thorough understanding. The what, the why, and critically, the how of each section.
No stone unturned.
Exactly. By the end, you should feel you have that mastery, enough to really excel in your research work, your exams, whatever it might be.
Okay, let's jump right in then. Fundamentally, what is a research proposal and why is it so important in academia and research?
Okay, so at its heart, it's basically this really structured document. Think of it like the architect's blueprint for your research project.
Okay, a blueprint.
Yeah. It clearly lays out what you plan to investigate. It argues why that investigation is important, why it's needed.
Right.
And it spells out in pretty precise detail the methods you're going to use to actually do the study.
So it's definitely more than just a form you have to fill out, more than just a hoop to jump through.
Oh, absolutely. Way more. It serves some really vital functions. First off, just the process of writing it forces you to organize your thoughts, to put them into a logical structure. It's like an amazing tool for really crystallizing your research idea.
I can see that. Getting it down on paper makes it real.
Exactly.
Right.
And second, it's a crucial chance to get feedback, constructive criticism on your plan before you sink loads of time and effort, maybe even money, into it.
That's a huge point. Getting that early feedback could save you from going down a wrong path later.
Totally. And then there's the practical side. In most places, academic settings, professional ones, you need an approved proposal to move forward.
Right, the gatekeepers.
Pretty much. Supervisors need to sign off on your thesis or dissertation idea. Funding bodies, well, they rely heavily on proposals to decide where to put their money. Think about governments, universities, big research institutions. They're looking at these proposals to decide which projects, big or small, get funding, get scholarships. They need to see that the research is well thought out, rigorous, and actually promises something valuable.
So the key ingredients for a good one. We're talking clarity, being really specific, and just being well organized, structured properly. Those are the hallmarks.
Precisely. A strong proposal doesn't leave things vague. It communicates exactly what you're planning, clearly and convincingly. You could almost think of it like a legal brief arguing for why your research deserves to exist.
Okay. A compelling case.
Yeah, every part needs to be sharp, logical, and connect together to build that strong case.
All right, let's break it down then. What are the essential parts? The building blocks every proposal needs.
Okay, drawing from Dr. Huyen Trong Luan's work again, there are several key sections you just can't skip. Let's start at the very beginning. The title page.
Title page. Seems simple enough, right? What absolutely has to be there?
Well, the exact format might differ a bit depending on your university or department, but generally, you absolutely need the full, correct title of your research.
Okay.
Your full name, your affiliate, like your university, your department, and the date you're submitting it. It's the first impression. So make it look professional, clear, easy to read. Super important.
Got it. First impressions count, even on paper. What's next after the title page?
Next up is the introduction. This is where you really set the scene. You orient the reader, tell them what this is all about.
So what's the main job or jobs of a really good introduction?
It does several critical things. It needs to provide the background, the context for your study. Why are we even talking about this? Then it has to clearly state the specific research problem you're tackling. Pinpoint it.
Okay.
Then you've got to argue why this research matters. Its significance. Why should anyone care?
Right. The so what question.
Exactly. And crucially, it needs to link your study to what's already out there, the existing research. It's like guiding the reader, starting broad, and then zooming in right onto your specific focus.
Okay, let's unpack that a bit. Providing context.
Yeah.
How do you do that effectively without just rambling about the general topic? It feels like a balancing act.
It really is. A great strategy is often called the funnel approach. You start broad, general statement about the wider field.
Okay.
So for us, TESOL, maybe you start by saying something like, online learning has become, huge in education globally recently.
Yeah, obvious starting point, right.
Then you narrow it down. You might say this shift to online has really impacted language learning, maybe especially in EFL settings where English is a foreign language.
Okay, getting more specific.
Exactly. Then finally, you bring in the specific angle you're looking at. So maybe out of all the language skills you say, speaking seems particularly affected in online environments. Maybe because there's less chance for spontaneous chat, less immediate feedback.
Ah, I see. Like a funnel, wide at the top, narrow at the bottom, leads the reader right to your point.
Precisely. It shows the bigger picture relevance, but directs them clearly to your specific research niche.
That's really helpful. Okay, so after setting the context, how do you nail down identifying the actual research problem?
The research problem is the core issue. The gap in knowledge your study wants to fill. You need to state it clearly, explain why it is a problem, what its consequences might be, and ideally, give some initial evidence that it's a real thing. So, writing a strong problem statement. First, describe the issue concisely, like, we don't really know enough about how online learning affects EFL students' confidence when speaking.
Okay.
Then, explain why that's a problem. You could argue, well, speaking is fundamental to language skill, right? But maybe online settings lack the interactive practice needed to build that confidence. And then, crucially, try to back it up a bit. Maybe mention some existing studies, perhaps cite Nguyen or Tran, who found Vietnamese EFL students often struggle with speaking. And maybe online learning makes that trickier.
Right, so not just saying there's a problem, but showing what it is, why it matters, and maybe some evidence it exists.
Exactly. That combination makes it much stronger.
Okay, so we've identified the problem. Now, explaining the significance. Why should anyone care about this problem besides me, the researcher?
Good question. Once the problem's clear, you have to articulate the significance. Why does your study matter? Who benefits?
Yeah.
Ask yourself, what's the real importance here? Who gains from this? Students, teachers, curriculum designers, policymakers, maybe the wider academic field.
Okay.
And how does it contribute to what we already know? So sticking with our example, online learning and speaking confidence. You might argue your study is significant for teachers trying to make better online courses, or for people designing curricula who need strategies for online speaking practice.
Right.
Maybe even policymakers thinking about EFL education in, say, Vietnam.
Right.
By looking specifically at speaking confidence, maybe your study gives insights on how to make online teaching better, offers practical techniques for teachers, and it adds to the academic discussion about digital learning, maybe specifically in Southeast Asia.
So you're really showing the potential impact, the ripple effect outwards from your specific study.
Exactly. Demonstrating its relevance beyond just filling a tiny academic gap.
And the last bit of the intro you mentioned was linking to existing research. Is this like a mini literature review?
Yeah, sort of. A condensed version right there in the introduction. You need to briefly touch on the most relevant studies, show you know what's already been done.
Okay.
Summarize a few key related studies, but critically, point out where the gaps are. What don't we know yet? Where are the inconsistencies?
Find the hole.
Find the hole, exactly. And then clearly state how your study is going to step into that gap or build on what's there. For instance, maybe you mentioned Zhao found online learning boosts listening skills.
Okay.
And Tran found students get anxious speaking online. But then you say, look, nobody's really asked Vietnamese EFL students directly about their perceptions of how online stuff affects their speaking confidence.
Ah, so you show what exists, identify the specific gap, and position your study as the one to fill it.
Precisely. Your study becomes the missing piece.
So the intro is like this powerful opening statement, sets the scene, flags the problem, argues for its importance, and shows exactly where your research fits in the bigger picture.
That sums it up perfectly. It lays all the essential groundwork for the rest of the proposal.
Okay, moving on, we've got research questions and research objectives next. They sound related, but what's the key difference? And what makes for good ones?
They are definitely related, very closely. Research questions are the specific, focused questions your study aims to answer.
The core inquiry.
Exactly. They need to clearly state the key things you're investigating, the variables.
Mm-hmm.
They should specify the population or context, who or where are you studying.
Mm-hmm.
They need to indicate the focus. Are you exploring, comparing, looking for challenges?
Mm-hmm.
And, super important, they have to be answerable. You need to be able to actually research them using proper methods, qualitative, quantitative, whatever.
So they have to be sharp, focused, and actually doable.
Think of them as the guiding stars for your whole research project.
Right. What are some common mistakes people make when writing these questions, and how do you fix a weak question?
Good point. Let's look at some examples. A weak one might be, does online learning affect students?
Vague.
Super vague.
Mm-hmm.
Which students? What part of online learning? What kind of effect? It's just too broad.
Okay.
A much stronger revised version could be, how does online learning influence Vietnamese EFL students speaking confidence? See, specific population, context, and variable.
Much clearer.
Another weak one. Is speaking important in English learning? Well, duh, probably. But it's too general, not really researchable in that form.
Right.
Better. How does speaking confidence affect the overall language proficiency of Vietnamese EFL learners? Clearer focus on a relationship between specific things.
Okay, makes sense.
Last example. What are the problems of online learning? Again, way too broad. What problems? For whom?
Yeah.
Stronger. What challenges do Vietnamese EFL students face in developing speaking confidence in online learning environments? Pinpoints a specific issue, context, population. Much more manageable.
Those examples really highlight how critical that precision is. Going from fuzzy to focused, you mentioned a checklist too, for checking your questions.
Yeah, it's useful. Ask yourself, is my question clear and focused? Does it spell out who and what I'm studying? And crucially, is it actually researchable with the methods and resources I have?
Okay.
If you can say yes to all those, you're probably on the right track.
Good checklist. So those are the questions guiding the study. How do the research objectives fit in? How do they relate?
Okay, so research objectives are what your study specifically aims to achieve. They come directly from the research questions.
Ah, okay.
They basically outline the specific actions you'll take to answer those questions. Think of them as the concrete steps on your research path.
Got it. Questions are the destination. Objectives are the steps on the map.
Nice analogy. And well-defined objectives guide everything else, your methodology, how you collect data, how you analyze it. Strong objectives are often described using SMART criteria.
Smart.
Yeah, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Though the time-bound part often applies more to the whole project timeline than each objective itself.
Right. Smart. Keeps them focused and realistic. Can you show how a question and its objectives link up, maybe using those examples from before?
Sure. Let's take the question. How does online learning influence the speaking confidence of Vietnamese EFL university students? A matching objective could be to examine Vietnamese EFL university students' perceptions of how online learning affects their speaking confidence. C. The objective directly targets the how in the question by examining perceptions.
Clear link. Yeah.
Or the question, what challenges do Vietnamese EFL students face? An objective. To identify specific challenges that hinder the development of speaking confidence. Again, directly addressing the what challenges part.
Makes sense.
And if you had a third question, maybe, what strategies can improve speaking confidence online? You might have objectives like to analyze how interaction levels influence confidence and to provide practical recommendations.
Okay.
So each objective flows logically from a question designed to tackle a specific part of it. Questions ask, objectives state what you'll do to find the answer.
That connection is much clearer now. Thanks. Okay, we touched on this earlier, but let's properly dive into the literature review now as its own section. What's a detailed structure and what's its main job in the proposal?
Right, the lit review. This is a really substantial part. It's your comprehensive, critical look at all the existing research, the scholarly work, that's directly relevant to your topic.
So, showing you've done your homework.
Exactly. But it's more than just showing you've read stuff. It demonstrates you deeply understand the current state of knowledge in your specific area.
Okay. How is it usually structured?
Typically, you start with an introduction. Briefly introduce the topic, why it's important. But crucially, this intro should also give the reader a roadmap. Outline the main themes, theories, or models you're going to discuss.
Like a preview.
Precisely. Then comes the main body. This is where you critically analyze the literature, usually organized by those themes you mentioned.
Right.
You discuss the major theories, the key studies, but here's the important part. You don't just summarize, you have to critically evaluate them.
How so?
Point out where researchers agree, where they disagree or contradict each other. Highlight the gaps, what's missing. What are the limitations of the current research?
Ah, okay. The critical eye.
Definitely. And then, like we said for the intro, you explicitly state how your research is going to address those gaps or limitations you just identified.
Connecting it back.
Always. And finally, you wrap it up with a conclusion. Summarize the key takeaways from your review. Restate clearly how your study fits in and contributes to everything you've just discussed.
So it's not just a book report. It's an argument built on existing work, showing where the conversation is, where it needs to go, and how your study pushes it forward.
That's a perfect way to put it. You're showing you're part of that scholarly conversation, and you have something meaningful to add. It builds your credibility.
Okay, credibility established. What comes after the literature review? The theoretical framework. What exactly is that, and why is it so fundamental?
Yes, the theoretical framework.
Mm-hmm.
Fundamentally, it's the set of theories, models, key concepts, definitions, all interconnected, that you're going to use as a lens.
The lens.
Yeah, a specific lens to look through when you analyze and interpret your findings. It provides the underlying logic, the philosophical assumptions behind your whole study.
Okay, so why is it so important?
Well, several reasons.
Right.
First, it gives you a structured way to define and explain the core concepts in your study. Ensures everyone's on the same page.
Clarity.
Second, it forms the foundation for your research design and guides how you'll analyze your data later on.
Structure.
Third, it explicitly connects your study to the bigger body of knowledge in your field, shows how your work relates to established theories.
Context. Right.
And finally, it justifies why you're taking a particular approach to investigating your research problem. It's like the intellectual scaffolding holding up your whole project.
Intellectual scaffolding. I like that. It gives shape and meaning to the study. How do you choose the right framework, though? There must be tons of theories out there.
Good question. Choosing requires careful thought. Start with your research problem. What are you really trying to understand?
Okay.
Then identify your key variables, the main things you're looking at. How might existing theories explain the relationships between them? Looking at how previous researchers tackled similar problems can be really helpful here. See what frameworks they used and if they worked well.
Learn from others.
Exactly. Ultimately, the best framework is the one that aligns most closely with your specific problem, offers a good explanation for what you expect to find, and provides a solid foundation for your investigation.
Makes sense.
And just a quick note, sometimes these frameworks are visualized. You might see diagrams, maybe circles or flowcharts, showing how the different parts of a theory connect. These can be helpful, but depend entirely on the specific theory you choose.
Right. It's about finding the best theoretical tool for your specific research job. Okay, moving into the practical side now. Methodology. This is where the how really comes in, isn't it?
Absolutely. The methodology section is your detailed plan of action. How are you actually going to do this research?
Okay, what needs to be in there?
Several key things. You need to clearly state your research design. Are you going qualitative, exploring experiences in depth, quantitative using numbers and stats, or mixed methods combining both?
Got it. Qual, quant, or mixed.
Then describe your data collection methods in detail. Surveys? What kind? Interviews? How will they be structured? Observations? What will you look for?
Be specific.
Very specific. You also need to discuss the delimitation and limitation of your study. We can unpack those. And crucially, cover the ethical considerations.
Okay, let's pause on delimitation and limitation. They sound similar. What's the difference?
Good distinction to make. Delimitation is about the choices you, the researcher, make to set the boundaries of your study. What's in, what's out.
Your conscious choices.
Exactly. Based on your questions, resources, time. It's about narrowing the focus to make the study manageable and clear. It stops it from becoming too sprawling.
Okay, so delimitation is setting your own fence. What's limitation then?
Limitation refers to the potential weaknesses or constraints that are kind of inherent in your study, mostly outside your control, that might affect your results.
Things you can't fully control.
Right, like maybe your sample size is smaller than ideal due to access issues, or the specific method you chose has known drawbacks. Acknowledging these limitations is really important.
Why? Isn't it admitting weakness?
It shows honesty, transparency. It helps others understand the context when they read your findings, and it often points the way for future research to address those very limitations.
Okay. So delimitation, researchers' choices to define scope. Limitation, acknowledging factors that might constrain the findings. Got it. That's clear. Now, ethical considerations. Hugely important. what are the core principles we need to address?
Absolutely critical. Your proposal must show how you'll protect participants and uphold ethical standards.
Yeah.
Several key principles. First, informed consent.
Meaning,
People have to agree voluntarily to participate after they fully understand the study's purpose, what they'll do, any risks or benefits. Getting written consent is usually the way to go.
okay, provide a form, get a signature.
Exactly. Like before an interview, you give them a form explaining everything, including their right to withdraw and get their signature. Just starting to ask sensitive questions without that, big no-no.
Right. What else?
Voluntary participation and right to withdraw. No pressure, no coercion. People must feel free to join and free to leave at any time for any reason without penalty.
Makes sense.
So on a survey, you tell them they can skip questions or stop altogether without any negative consequences.
Good practice. Next.
Confidentiality and anonymity. Protecting their private information. Confidentiality means keeping their data secure and private. Anonymity is even stronger, means you don't collect identifying info at all, so even you can't link data back to a specific person.
Okay. How do you manage that?
For anonymity, maybe an online survey with no name smells. Analyze data in aggregate. For confidentiality, if you know who they are, like in interviews, use pseudonyms, store data securely, limit access, sharing identifiable transcripts without permission. That's a breach.
Got it. Secure the data, protect identities. What about harm?
Crucial point. Avoiding harm and ensuring safety. Your research shouldn't cause physical, psychological, or emotional distress. Be extra careful with sensitive topics. Anticipate risks, minimize them, explain them upfront.
So, if talking about tough experiences,
You'd provide info on support resources, remind them they can stop anytime. Pushing someone who's clearly upset, that's unethical.
right, prioritize well-being. What about data integrity?
Honesty and integrity, non-negotiable. Never make up data, never fudge results. Report findings accurately, even if they're not what you hoped for. And cite properly, avoid plagiarism at all costs.
So, keep detailed records, cite everything, don't cheat.
Basically, yes.
Yeah.
And don't selectively ignore data that doesn't fit your narrative. That's a serious violation.
Okay, one more?
Fairness and avoiding bias. Treat participants equitably. Select them fairly, without discrimination. And be aware of your own biases. Try to minimize how they affect your interpretation.
How do you ensure fair selection?
Try to recruit a diverse group relevant to your question, not just your mates or the easiest people to reach, as that could skew results.
Okay, so ethics covers consent, voluntary participation, privacy, safety, honesty, and fairness. It's a comprehensive framework for responsible research.
Absolutely. It's foundational.
So after detailing the methods and ethics, what's usually next in the proposal?
After methodology, you typically have a section on the contribution of the study. This is where you explicitly state the value and potential impact of your research.
Back to the so what question, but more detailed.
Exactly. You answer. Why is this research important? What new insights will it offer? Who specifically benefits? How does it advance knowledge or maybe help solve a practical problem?
Okay.
And contributions can be different types. Theoretical, refining a theory. Empirical, providing new data. Or even methodological, maybe you developed a new way to measure something.
So clearly spelling out the anticipated value add. What comes after that?
The research timetable. Basically, a realistic schedule for getting the research done.
The plan.
Yeah, it shows you've thought through the steps and have a feasible timeline. A Gantt chart is common. You know, those bar charts showing tasks over time.
Seen those.
Like lit review, weeks 1 to 4, data collection, weeks 5-10, and so on. Or you could use a table listing tasks, describing them briefly, and giving the time frame maybe develop interview protocol, 2 weeks.
Helps keep things on track and shows you're organized.
Exactly. Demonstrates planning.
Okay, we're nearing the end of the proposal structure.
Right.
What's the final essential piece?
The final indispensable part is the references section.
Bibliography, essentially.
Yes, but it has to be precise. A complete, accurately formatted list of every single source you cited in the proposal.
Accuracy is key here.
Absolutely critical. You need to follow a specific style guide consistently. APA, MLA, whatever your institution requires. Every source mentioned in the text must be in the list, and every item in the list must be cited in the text.
No orphans, no ghosts.
Good way to put it. It's fundamental academic practice, allows readers to find your sources.
Wow, okay. That was an incredibly thorough walkthrough of all those components. So if we boil it all down, what's the main takeaway message about writing a great research proposal?
The core message, I think, is that a really well-structured, carefully thought out, clearly written proposal isn't just a bureaucratic hurdle. It's the absolute foundation for good research.
the bedrock.
It really is. It's your plan, your argument, your guide for the whole research journey.
And the keys to making it strong are what again?
Clarity, specificity in your aims, your methods, deep engagement with the literature, knowing what's out there, a solid theoretical framework, rigorous ethical methods, clearly stating the contribution, a realistic timeline, and, yes, meticulous referencing.
It's a lot to juggle, but it sounds like getting the proposal right sets you up for success down the line.
Hugely. It's not just about getting the green light. It's about setting yourself up to do meaningful, impactful work, especially in fields like TESOL and English language studies, where good research can really make a difference.
Yeah, it becomes that roadmap you mentioned, guiding you towards generating those valuable insights.
Exactly. Insights that can genuinely advance the field or improve practice.
Well, this has been incredibly insightful. Thank you for breaking down such a crucial part of the research process so clearly. And a big thank you to all of you listening for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
We really hope this detailed exploration gives you that sense of mastery, that confidence you need to craft truly compelling research proposals for your own work.